Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Breakdown, and we are here to welcome you to the Geno Smith era of fantasy football.
Go, Geno.
There were quite a bit of injuries that we're going to discuss to start here, and the Geno Davis one probably has the biggest implications across the team.
Geno
Davis was in Earth Girls Are Easy. Geno Smith is
a league of their own,
which is a baseball.
Geno Smith is hoping to be in after next week. A league of
this
his
is
own.
a football podcast.
Yes. Which Geno Davis has nothing to do with. So I'm your host, Wayne Cavati, and joining me as always are the two best co-hosts in fantasy football. Fanduel Fee, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to jump in.
Dunton, how you doing over there?
I'm doing great. The irony of the Geno Smith, Gina Davis talk is that Gina Davis's character is from Oregon in a league of their own.
The connections are uncanny.
I mean, it is Seattle, Washington, but, still Pacific Northwest.
The great Pacific Northwest. That's correct.
Right. That's correct.
So,
let's go.
Where do we start? Do we start with locks of the week or do we start with injuries? Let's start with injuries because there's a lot.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So obviously we just touched on the first one with Geno Smith. I don't think anyone's jumping at the bit to go pick him up off the waiver wire, but there are huge ramifications because there are huge fantasy stars on the Seattle Seahawks. Fee, what do you think this means for the Tyler Lockett's of the world and the rest of the crew?
Well, I think that Geno Smith is kind of serviceable. He's no Russell Wilson, and yes, numbers will hurt a bit, but I don't think that they're going to be completely terrible. Geno Smith's been around. He's been a serviceable quarterback. He may not put up the points himself, but I feel like he'll get the ball to his playmakers, which is DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And so I think that those guys, while they'll take a bit of a hit, I still think that you have to play them and they'll be okay. They're not going to be as good as you would expect with Russell Wilson, and that's an obvious kind of situation. But it's not like you're not going to play those guys. Geno Smith. He led a 96-yard touchdown drive at the end of that game, coming off the bench cold. Mm-hmm. So I think he'll be all right. But you're definitely still playing your Seahawk receivers. Your Seahawk running back on the other hand, whether it's Chris Carson or
Alex Collins.
Right. I don't. You probably won't be playing those guys, but I think you stick with your receivers.
Dutton?
I mean, when you look at Geno Smith, the joking tagline of Geno Smith is best backup quarterback in the NFL, right? And now we get to see if that's true. He looked good. I mean, even the interception he threw wasn't necessarily his fault. It was a bad throw, but I mean, Tyler Lockett did fall down on the route, so you can't fully blame him. DK Metcalf actually got more targets when Geno Smith came in. I felt like he became the number one option, so maybe that's good for DK Metcalf owners. I mean, obviously now we have to see what he does this week, right? Because it's one thing to come in off the bench cold, like Fee said. But now defenses can plan for him. Defenses,
right, they got the film on him, right?
Right, they can force him.
No slouch.
Right, the Steelers are not a bad defense by any means, so we will see what happens. I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting dynamic in Seattle because we've never had to deal with Russell Wilson missing a game, right? Like, so this is brand new to fantasy owners, brand new to Seattle, brand new to everyone.
This week, I think might be a little tougher than most going against the Steelers.
Right, it's like the worst timing of it.
Right. So even more so now. He's probably going to have a rough time. But I think Russell Wilson's out 4 to 6 weeks, is it?
Yeah,
or 6 to 8.
Or 6 to 8.
Scheduled to come back week 10 is what they're saying. Yeah.
So while this week might be a tough one, I think he'll get his feet under him, and going forward, things might be okay there. Again, you got to weather your expectations a bit, especially this coming up week against the Steelers. But I think going forward, you might be okay with the guys you got.
So Geno Smith isn't going to be an waiver wire injury replacement, but if Darrell Williams is still out there in your leagues, he's probably the hottest guy on the waiver wire this week because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is now on the IR for at least 3 weeks. So obviously that doesn't really mess up Kansas City's offense per se, but I mean, there's no question he's the top waiver wire pick this week, right, Dunton?
Yeah, I mean, it's baffling to me. If you look at just go to any fantasy site, look at the weekly rankings for running backs and look at the number of Qs that are up in like the top 17 running backs. I think 10 of them are listed as questionable going into this week. So any running back at this point that you can pick up would be a top waiver wire pickup. I think the Chiefs offense obviously bodes the best because they're going to score the most points. They also have a favorable matchup against a not so vaunted Washington football team defense that is nowhere near what everyone thought they were going to be. So the Chiefs' problem is not their ability to score points.
Yeah. Fee, I'll go to you on your team. Devonte Booker is probably going to be a hot commodity this week, but it's kind of like the the Seahawks Steelers situation. It's he looked good last week, but you got the Rams this week.
Yeah. Booker may be a good pickup. Saquon, they say, is out 2 to 3 weeks, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd be okay for a couple of weeks, but I don't think he's a long-term fix. I don't know if Daniel Jones is going to play. If it's Glennon, I mean, I think that Giants offense is just going to take a massive hit, and they might get shut out. To be very honest with you, the Rams D is crazy good, and with all the injuries that the Giants offense have, I don't know that picking up Devonte Booker is going to help you at all in fantasy.
Yeah. I think if the matchup was a little bit different, maybe you could, but it's definitely not a favorable matchup this week. And then let's talk a little bit about, this isn't an injury, but the Gruden, right? We've had Gruden's gone. We've in our year and a half of having this show, we have said that offense is full of talented playmakers and they're underutilized. What do we think this means going forward for the Raiders playmakers? What do we think about Josh Jacobs? Do we see the Josh Jacobs that we remember eventually?
I think so. I think this is a good thing for Josh Jacobs. We don't know what the other coaches or whoever is going to be coaching the team and running the plays think about what they have there, but their offense is decent. And I think they utilize Josh Jacobs more, you can't utilize him less.
He becomes the security blanket, right? Like, you have a new coaching staff, new play calling, all that. What's the easy thing to do? Hey, Derek, turn around, hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs. Let's establish some momentum. Let's establish the run, and then take the training wheels off and have you start throwing the ball.
And it's like what you said, like what we saw in the first 3 weeks when he was averaging 400 yards a game. Is against the right defense, Derrick Carr could be that quarterback. But, you've said it 100 times, you're not going to win in the NFL throwing 50 passes a week, right? And
nope.
Gruden just never used the running game right. And I think maybe not this week. This is a kind of a tough matchup if you believe in Denver, but we know longtime listener Anthony does not believe in Denver. And the last couple of weeks, he's been quite right on his projections on the Denver defense. So it could be Josh Jacobs' return to stardom this week. If they just start handing him the ball and let him.
Well, yeah, I mean, regardless of what you think about Denver's defense, they're only giving up 207 yards passing a game. So maybe it is hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs time, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
And then, just real quick, obviously this one stinks because if you have Dalvin Cook, the chances are you already have Alexander Madison. but they both were out of practice today. So I mean, like you were talking about all the cues on the questionables on the injury report. I mean, it's crazy. Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, I think I saw miss.
Both of them. Yes. Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb.
It's wild. But again, how much of this is the load management that we talked about in the preseason, that, there's just so many games and so many practices. Everyone forgets that, yeah, week 17 is an extra game, but that's also an extra week of practices, right? There's more that goes along with an extra week.
And they're gonna and teams are gonna hold players out of practice to give them rest.
Yeah.
But they need a reason to. And
so they have to then list them
as questionable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So you're gonna see a ton of questionable players all year long when really they're fine.
You have to pay attention to more than ever, right? It's not like previous years where you see a guy questionable and like, ooh, questionable. Now it's like questionable. Questionable is like, oh, questionable, but he's gonna be all right. Like he's questionable, but like, it's questionable like that he's questionable. Right?
I mean, take Nick Chubb for instance. Okay, yes, he's questionable. I
Great
saw
example.
That he had
he's
some
playing.
sort of injury. I'm pretty sure Nick Chubb is fine.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So let's move on to our locks of the week, where last week we were the best week we've had. We hit our consensus lock of the week with the Cardinals. That was my pick. Dunton with his Bills getting points and the underdog. But let's talk about Fanduel Fee, who's on absolute fire of late. Back-to-back crazy picks. The week before, he took the Giants underdogs by 7.5. This week, he took the Texans by 9, or getting 9.5. And so Fee, you've been on fire. We're going to let you lead off with your locks of the week this week.
Yeah, all right. I have a few. I'm only gonna tell you one for right now, and maybe I'll go over some others after you guys go. But I like Washington plus the 6.5 against the Chiefs.
Another crazy.
I know that
ladies and gentlemen.
I know that the Chiefs are coming off, some poor play recently, and they're going to want to get right. Washington's at home, so they're a home dog, getting almost a touchdown, and they tend to keep games close while their defense is terrible. So are the Chiefs' defense.
That's true.
And I just think that 6.5 points at home is good enough for them to keep the game close enough that they cover in 6.5.
Dutton.
I'm taking the Packers and the 4.5 against the Bears. I think the Packers I don't think the Bears can compete with the Packers. I just don't. I don't think Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is the right answer at quarterback for the Bears long term. This week, he's not the answer. I think the Packers defense is nothing but improving. I think the Packers offense is clicking. I mean, Devonte Adams had 200 yards receiving last week. That's insane, right? Like pretty good, right? Yeah, I'm taking the Packers.
I'm going to take the Bills, lock them in at 5 and I'm sorry, they're giving 5.5 to Tennessee. I think they're the best team in football right now. I'm not going to lie to you. They are just every aspect of right down to Bass. I mean, he's one of the better kickers right now for fantasy, especially. There's just everything on their team is clicking. And I just haven't seen enough from Tennessee that they've impressed me that they could. They have an offense. We know that, right? We know that they have that juggernaut of an offense that when it gets rolling downhill, they're going to score points. But I don't think Buffalo is the team that's going to allow them to get rolling downhill. So that would be my pick of the week.
Let me give you two others.
Yeah.
So that first pick, that Washington plus 6.5, that's my balls pick. Okay, that's my ballsy.
But those have been coming through for you.
They have, and that's why I decided to throw that one out first. But that's my ballsy pick. If I were to throw out a lock, I think it's the Rams minus 10.5 against the Giants. While the Giants have been able to keep games close, Daniel Jones is coming off a concussion. Galladay is out. Barkley is out. There's just so many injuries. Their defense has not been good. And the Rams are a very good team. And I just think that the Rams minus 10.5 against the Giants is near as close to a lock as you're going to get. And then I also had I like Las Vegas plus the 3.5 against Denver. They get rid of Gruden. There's a bit of turmoil there. I think they come together. I think the players all come together. Gruden, what Gruden said and did, that's like a direct hit to like most of those players.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, all they have is each other, and I think they come together and play hard for someone who's not there anymore. You know what I mean? Like they play hard because he's not there. And so I think that's him,
in spite of him.
Right.
I 100% agree with that. I
think and getting the 3.5, I like it. I mean, Denver's not all that great of a team. I think Teddy Bridgewater's coming off injury too.
Mhm.
So I'd take the Raiders plus 3.5 also.
And this isn't like throw talent out the window, right? This isn't like what's the Chargers? Anthony Lynn, right? The Chargers,
right?
Like this isn't like a guy the players loved and the team wasn't just working, and it's like, hey, we might have to get rid of you, right? This is like, F you, buddy. Like you are a scumbag, right? Like
I mean the reaction of we haven't heard much from them, but the quote from Mark Davis today of Ask the NFL is really interesting. Right? Did you not hear this? So like what would you like to say about the John Gruden situation? And he says, you know what you need to know. If you want to know more, ask the NFL. Something to that effect. So almost as if, hey, my hands were tied in this and this was above me that this came from, right? Which it might have come from above him at this point, right? Who knows? But I think, but the reaction of many of his former players, me being a Bucks fan, listening to many of the former Bucks, I mean, for years, I've been saying John Gruden won a championship that Tony Dungy couldn't finish, right? For years. And
100%.
Everyone knew that, but every player came out yesterday with that. I mean, he just turned the screws differently than Dungy did, but he didn't do anything. And after that, we were not good. And he's right. They were right. All of them were right.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be interesting. I think these players can rebound. I just think there's so much turmoil above the players. That's what I'm worried about. Like, there's so much of like, who's going to be the new coach? Who's staying? Who's going? Is the GM getting fired? What's going on? Are the Raiders in trouble? Are the Raiders the tip of the iceberg? And are they all this being called in for questions because all these other people are now implicated in the 600,000+ emails that are out there, right? This is an insane situation.
Look, Mark Davis is kind of like the Hal Steinbrenner of football, right? He's one of the legendary money slinging
prodigal sons,
right? And he signed Gruden to a ridiculous contract. And last week, the week prior, when it was, I say this, just a racist remark, right? But everyone was like, why isn't he fired yet? And the bottom line is Mark Davis is a businessman and he's not going to fire him because he's on the hook for 10 years worth of salary.
Right.
All of a sudden, everything else comes out. And I don't care about the 10-year. He should have been fired 2 weeks.
No, for sure.
I don't care. Sure. I'm just telling you what's going on.
No, I agree with you of why he wasn't 100%.
Everything else comes out. And now Mark Davis could be like, look, man, you got two options here. You either resign or we're going to sue you, right? Because you're going to get fired and we're not paying you, right?
Right.
You are not getting paid for this, buddy. So we'll give you the option to walk away here.
I mean, I hope you're right, Fee. I hope the players rally behind this, like us against him. Like, we're going to do this despite what you think of us, despite what you think of Carl Nassib on the defensive line, despite what you think of these, African-American players, despite what you think of the fact that, and that's the thing, the Raiders are one of the most diverse teams in football when you look historically. Like, that's the crazy thing, right? Like, so it makes it so much worse.
So much worse. But we could talk for days on this. Let's get back to fantasy football.
Yeah.
Who are we locking in as our lock of the week?
I like the Bills against the Titans. I think they have something to prove once again on national TV on Monday Night Football. Like, hey, you've talked about us for a week, and now we'll show you how good we are.
I'm good with
Yeah,
the Bills, obviously, because I picked them, but I'm also good with the Rams. I mean, there might not be a single starter on the Giants playing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with both of those picks. Like I said, that Washington pick that I first threw out was a ballsy pick, but I think the Rams are pretty much a lock against the Giants minus the 10.5. I also like the Bills too. So, I mean, you can kind of go whichever way you guys want to go.
Bills are just safer because it's a smaller spread.
Right. Bills are safer. So that's why this week we're going to go.
But they're
big or
also
go
playing,
home.
they're also playing a better team.
That's
Going big or going home, and we're going with the Rams against the Giants and the 10.5. Go big or go home.
You want to go Rams?
We're doing it.
All
Locking
right,
it
let's
in.
go Rams. All right, we're going over to Fanduel Fee and his stacks of the week. Last week was a decent week. It would have been better if Daniel Jones wasn't Little Mac against Mike Tyson and just
Oh
Yeah.
man.
You know, last week was tough because of Daniel Jones. But I mean, if he stayed in that game, he would have did just fine. Kadarius Toney was
you called
Kadarius Toney was my I don't know, my just amazing pick out of nowhere.
it.
That ended up blowing up and being amazing. And you want to know what's funny? I had Kadarius Toney in my FanDuel lineup until about 10 minutes before lock, and I took him out and put in J.D. McKissick, who did absolutely nothing because I thought with Gibson's stress fracture in his leg that he wouldn't be as effective. And Gibson ended up being just fine. McKissick did nothing. Toney blew up. And of course, I did not listen to myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're the only person that doesn't listen to your advice continuously.
Yeah, and it screws me every time. I don't know why I just don't do what I say to do.
So who are you not going to start this week, Fee?
But everyone else is going to.
All right, here we go. Let's start with the stacks. I like Kyler Murray going against the Browns and stacking him with Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore is close to getting number 2 wide receiver targets and receptions every week. He's almost supplanted AJ Green, basically. Yes, DeAndre Hopkins is still there. You could absolutely stack him there, but Rondale Moore is only 5,700 this week. So you'd be really saving money. And Kyler Murray is the second most expensive quarterback on the slate. So I think stacking Murray and Rondale Moore against the Browns is a smart move. You kind of can't really go wrong with Arizona's offense. I also really love, we talked about him before, but the Rams offense against the Giants, going Stafford with both Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. I love what Robert Woods did last week. Really kind of blew up, which was amazing to see that Stafford can throw it to somebody else. And I think that if I had to pick 2 guys, I'd go Stafford and Woods again this week against the Giants and not Cooper Kupp. But really, you can't go wrong either way. And if you could, you might just triple stack the game and go Stafford, Kupp, and Woods. A couple of value plays for you. It's a tough week. There's not really a whole lot of value to go around. Even like guys that are playing because other guys are injured don't have great matchups. And so while they might be cheap, I wouldn't necessarily play them. Darrell Williams is one of those guys for the Chiefs. I'm not sure I'm sold on that so much. So a couple of value plays. I like Antonio Gibson as long as he's healthy going against the Chiefs. We talked about how the Chiefs defense is not great. He's only 6,700. The Washington football team feed him the ball all day long. And it seems that McKissick has kind of taken a bit of a backseat. I really like Darrell Henderson. I'm not sure. He's 7,300, which actually isn't too bad, especially against the Giants. I'm not sure you could go with 4 guys in that game. I suppose you could, but you'd kind of be hamstringing yourself a little bit there. So you kind of got to make a decision. I like Cortland Sutton against the Raiders at 6,600. We talked about how I think the Raiders are going to win this game. So game script would say that if Denver's behind, they're going to have to throw the ball. And Cortland Sutton's a main beneficiary of that. He's at 6,600. And when I just talked about him before, but Rondale Moore going against Cleveland. He's down at 5,700. I really like him this week too.
Yeah, I like those picks. I'm big at. Here's the thing about McKissick. Like I would definitely go with Gibson, especially at 6,700. That is incredible value. He's been looking good, but no Curtis Samuel, no Logan Thomas, and they're going to be probably down by 60 for at some point in that game, and then just start unloading. Don't you think they could probably use both? I mean, and McKissick's probably not that much money this week.
Yeah, I do, but like I said earlier, I think Washington keeps it close.
Yeah.
And so if it's close enough, they can't abandon the run.
That's true.
And even if they do abandon the run, Gibson can still play a role because he catches the ball out of the backfield. Now, if they're in like some sort of 2-minute offense, or if they're down big, they're going to take him out, and McKissick's going to get a ton of run. But like I said, I think they keep it close, and I think they stick with Gibson because he's really the better runner and he's the better player.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. All right, so there's your stacks of the week. We can move in and on to the weekly starts and sits portion of the show. Now, this is a sad week when you have to pick starts and sits because you don't have the Jets, you don't have the Falcons, and that means there's a lot of tough defense. I mean, even the Saints, since their first, they've let up 3 scores a game, so you got 3 teams that have been very friendly to fantasy opponents this year on a bye. So that means there's some tougher matchups. Although I think the running backs, even though there's some with the Q next to them, I think most of the running backs this week there's a lot of good matchups for juicy fantasy days by running backs. But we'll get started by looking back at our starts last week. We did very well. Dak Prescott was our pick for quarterback. Then we went with Damian Harris, who got in the end zone. Jonathan Taylor and Leonard Fournette also did well, and some of the other picks. Laviska Shenault, man, inexcusable on the Jaguars once again. The guy has a catch for 58 yards. Yeah, let's only target him 2 more times. I mean, Urban Meyer just makes no sense to me. He
ruined us.
He's got to go.
Yeah. I mean, we had Sanders and Woods as our other options too.
Yeah, and they killed it.
And they crushed it.
Yeah. And then
thanks a lot, Urban Meyer.
We go back to week 1 with James Robinson. He had 8 touches, and they really should have a win under their belt, and that changes the momentum of the season. If you gave James, obviously we're seeing what James Robinson could do, right?
Yep.
And now you give the James Robinson 32 touches in a game, and you forget you got Laviska Shenault, who had 100 yards receiving a week before. It's just like, man, how about you do everything all at once there? That's how football works. And then Schultz, the Cowboys tight end Schultz was our pick of the week, and he had another good, especially in a PPR. I think he had about 12 points in a PPR, maybe a little bit more. So he had another strong week. So let's move on to our weekly starts and sits just our starts first for this week. Fee, we'll start with you at quarterback.
I'm going Jared Goff against the Bengals. The Bengals D, not good. Their offense is very good. Could turn into a shootout. And Detroit's offense has been better than expected. And Goff is a big reason for that. They haven't really been running the ball a ton. Goff's been throwing it, getting 300-yard games, and getting you fantasy points. So I'm sticking with Jared Goff this week as my start of the week against Cincinnati.
That looks like you're hoping for a shootout with your start of the week.
I'm going with Joe Burrow. He's got it. Jamar Chase and him have something. They're fun to watch. T. Higgins is back. Tyler Boyd is a good third option. As much as I know you don't like Joe Mixon, he is a good running back option for this team. I like Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow has a good week. The only thing I'm worried about is, and I don't know, this might be the first time ever that somebody is listed with this injury. He is on voice rest. Have you seen this?
No, I don't even know what that means.
He took a throat punch apparently in the game on Sunday, and he has to rest his voice because they're worried about, like, he apparently damaged his larynx or something. So I hope they have some hand signal calls ready to go because of, the loud Detroit.
This stuff.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So,
Uh,
but I'm going with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, he does having Higgins back opens him up a lot more. He's a good pick there. I'm taking Heineke. I mean, especially if Fee is right with his projection that they keep this game close, but he's shown he's decent. Play the Chiefs offense. I'm sorry, the Chiefs offense is what wins them ball games. It hasn't been their defense. And him and Terry McLaurin have a good connection, and I just feel like him, Gibson, and McKissick will be very active check downs, and even without those two big weapons, I think he has a decent enough day, especially with guys like Matt Ryan off the grid, and everyone's favorite Jameis Winston, who I'm sure people are crying that they can't start this week, but he could be a good waiver wire option. So who do we want to lock in as the start of the week?
I think Heineke gets in a shootout, so I can be with you on that guy.
What do you think, Faye?
Yeah, I'd go Heineke. Sure.
Okay, we could do that. Let's move on to running back. Dunton, we'll start with you this time.
I'm going with Henderson against the Giants, who cannot. The Giants are absolutely horrendous at stopping the run. They give up 138 rushing yards per game. I expect Henderson to have 100 yards in the first half and then sit maybe most of the second half, but you'll still have 18 to 24 points.
Fair enough. Fee, you already talked about yours, but talk about him a little bit more.
I did. Yeah, it's Antonio Gibson. I said it earlier. I think that Washington keeps the game close, keeps Gibson involved, and sneaky shootout potential in Kansas City. So I'm going Antonio Gibson.
I'm gonna stick with my guy. Jonathan Taylor's on a tear, man. I mean, he came out of the gates guns a-blazing with that 76-yard touchdown pass in the first 5 minutes of the game. He's got the Texans this week. I mean, he went from a guy that we were worried about 3 weeks ago to being back locked and loaded. And of course, the matchups have been very favorable, which have helped him. But I think he's a guy you got to start. And after his last 3 weeks himself, I just mentioned him, but you got to start James Robinson this week if you're not. He's playing the Dolphins, and the Dolphins are still the worst fantasy defense against the running back. So I do want to throw James Robinson in there, but I don't think anybody's sitting him any longer at this point. So who do we want to lock in? I like Gibson this week. I won't lie to you.
I like Jonathan Taylor going against Houston, but
Yeah,
obviously I do too. So I'm good with that.
I can go with Taylor against the Texans.
All right. What do we think about Davis Mills? Do you think that against the Patriots? I mean, is this guy
good?
Yeah, he looks all right. I mean,
is this guy going to get better, or was that the Patriots coming off the Brady buzz and had a bit of a Brady buzz hangover?
I don't know.
I think that, but
I think he looks okay. I mean, yeah, he's I say it a lot, but I feel like he's a serviceable type of guy that can really kind of get it done for you. I feel like he can manage the game for you.
Yeah,
he's not one of these quarterbacks that's just gonna like completely throw it away and have 5 interceptions a game and he's no Nathan Peterman.
Unfortunately, he has 0 running game to support him in the backfield.
Right.
Because you can't trust any of those guys. All right, so we'll move on to wide receiver. I'll get it started. I'm going with my sleeper of the year, who is wide awake now, and that's Mike Williams against the Ravens. The Ravens keep winning those ball games in weird and wild ways, but they haven't stopped an offense yet, that's for sure. And Mike Williams has looked good. I also want to just throw out there that I think the law firm of Jacoby and Myers against the Cowboys, I think he's a good pick this week, just because the Cowboys let up some points to wide receiver. But my absolute lock and load pick is Mike Williams. Fee.
I am going with Robert Woods against the New York Giants. I talked about him earlier. you can obviously go with Kupp, but if Woods is on the fence for you, I'd say just play him and hope that Stafford slings it around to everyone, and he has a game like he did last week.
Dutton.
I'm going with Chris Godwin against the Eagles, and I'm going with Chris Godwin because I feel like he's the forgotten receiver in Tampa Bay these days, despite having at least 55 yards in every game this year. Tampa Bay is the only NFL team that has 3 wide receivers with at least 300 yards receiving already. But like I said, Chris Godwin feels like the forgotten guy on this bunch right now because Antonio Brown's the big play guy. Mike Evans getting all the touchdowns. But watch out for Chris Godwin this week.
I like all 3 of these guys. I don't care who we pick. So I'll throw it to you guys as our lock of the week.
Here's the one thing I'll say about Woods. I'm not disagreeing with anything Fee said. I think everyone's starting him already.
That's fair.
After his performance last week.
Well, if there are people that are not starting Mike Williams, you probably should be. And I will absolutely be on board with taking Mike Williams as our start of the week.
Right. For sure. I mean, how open was he on both of his touchdowns last week? Like, did anybody else on the Browns want to know that guy's pretty good right now?
I mean, I don't think there was anybody within 10, 15 yards of
10. It might have been like 20 or 30, and not one. It was crazy.
I mean, he's definitely not only. He's vastly improved, right? And he already had freakish ability when he came into the league.
All right, Mike Williams, it is.
All right, I am going to say that these 3 are my picks, but I'm looking back at last week, and 3 of the 4 starts were my picks. So I guess we're okay rolling with this.
Right.
We did well. Dutton, we'll start with you for tight ends.
I'm going with Mr. Knox from the Buffalo Bills. Let's be honest, people. He is the hottest thing going on the hottest team. Why Josh Allen gets a new weapon is beyond us right now. Like, is it fair if you're anybody else playing the Bills? Probably not.
But you know what else? I agree with you on Knox. But when you say he's got a new weapon, you know what else I think is making him better is I think Zach Moss is becoming a legit. He's already surpassed Singletary.
He was my start of the week until right before the show started, and I put Henderson in at running back, Zach Moss, because of how good he is.
Nice game against Tennessee.
Yeah.
Fee.
Yeah, I'm going with Noah Fant this week against the Raiders. I just think that he's getting a ton of love because, with Judy is out and Hamler is out, they got to throw it to someone. Fant is probably, the second best receiver on the team at the moment. And he's been getting a lot of volume. And I think that you should be starting him no matter what going forward.
Yeah, Las Vegas fantasy wise against the tight end, I feel like they haven't stopped a tight end in about 6 years, right? Like they're traditionally one of the worst against the tight end. So tight ends are weird this year. We've discussed it. If you can get 8 points out of a tight end, obviously the Dawson Knoxes are getting you big points, and obviously you're going to start Travis Kelce, and they're getting you big points. But I think if you can get 8 to 10 points out of a tight end this year, you're doing well. And I think Gesicki looks like he is with Brissett at quarterback. At least we'll see what happens when Tua comes back. But he looks more like the tight end he was last year. I still worry about Gesicki. We talked about the percentage he lined up in the slot last year. But Will Fuller's back on the IL. Whoa, what a surprise. Will Fuller's on the IL again. So I think Gesicki I think that's why he's getting some of these bigger catches again. He's lining up in the slot a little more like he did last year. So against the Jaguars, who we said can't stop really anything right now, I like Gesicki. But if we're going with a lock, I'm locking in Knox. Obviously, he's a prime target, and he looks good out there, right? He's taking balls a long way. Like he
had 4 targets last week. He caught 3 of them for 117 yards.
Yeah, so So the problem there is he only had 4 targets.
Right, and it is a big problem. You're right.
And so while they are big plays, it's hard to trust that for fantasy. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
that's why Knox, yeah, he's another target, but you got Diggs, Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders,
Yeah, there's mouths to feed for sure.
Gabriel Davis, and Knox, and Zach Moss, and Josh Allen, by the way, who also runs the ball, right? So like
Gabriel Davis or is Gina Davis there?
it could be, it's G Davis. So there's a lot of mouths to feed, and it's hard to trust someone even only on 4 targets.
We could go with
That's all I'm saying about it. I do like Knox. He's a solid
But no, I
player,
agree with you.
and they should get him the ball more. But it's just hard to trust a guy that's only getting 4 targets.
I'm good with Fant because, like I said, the Raiders haven't stopped the defense a tight end in 4 years.
We'll do it. We're locking in Fant. All right.
All right. So let's move on to sits of the week. Sits, we did all right. I did it again. I killed 3 people last week. Calvin Ridley didn't even make it to Sunday.
Didn't even make it to the game.
Right. George Kittle didn't make it to Sunday, but before going on the IL, and Saquon Barkley is now out for 2 to 3 weeks. And those were 3 of my sits. And on top of it, if you remember, I didn't pick a sit quarterback last week because I didn't think there was one. So I went 3 for 3 in injuring people in my projections, and I'm keeping that alive. Overall, the fantasy football breakdown sits were Matt Ryan, which we missed on. He's a fantasy starter. I definitely thought he was going to take a step back this year, but
especially when Calvin Ridley didn't get on the plane.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, oh, this is it. We're locked in with this one.
But I guess Patterson and Pitts are enough to keep him going. And
Right.
Gage, right? Like, let's not sell short Russell Gage wasn't there either.
That's
Like,
true. Right.
both his receivers. Barkley was our sit at running back, so we were right, but unfortunately it was due to injury. OBJ at receiver and Robert Tanyan at
OBJ is a permanent sit until further notice.
He doesn't even have to be in a conversation any longer.
Yep.
So let's move over to sits for this week. I'm going to start because I'm going to start with a fantasy football breakdown sit favorite of all time, and that's Kirk Cousins against the Panthers. We've talked about the Panthers defense. We like them. They make big plays at the right time. Cook and Madison, we discussed earlier, were both out, and like we said, it's probably load maintenance, but we thought that with Dalvin Cook last week, and he wound up not playing. And I don't think Cousins is in a good spot this week, and he's had 2 really bad weeks in a row. So that's my pick. Fee.
Well, I am going with Joe Burrow this week, who, yes, was Dunton's start. So one of us is going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And one of us is going to be right. But I'm sitting Joe Burrow this week because Detroit's defense is better than people think. And I think with so many mouths to feed in Cincinnati and, so many ways to spread it around, it might get a little confusing for him. He has been really good, and there's no doubt about that. I think just for fantasy for this week, I think that he might be a sit.
Interesting.
Plus the throat punch.
Plus the
throat punch. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
Got
that
it.
whole thing.
The throat punch.
Whether he can breathe, whether he
Got to
can
be
talk,
a factor.
It could absolutely be a big factor.
Dutton.
I'm sitting Derrick Carr against the Broncos. Like I said earlier, they're giving up 207 yards a game. I think I want the earlier conversation to be true for the Raiders and that they're going to rally behind this controversy, but I actually think it's going to be the reverse. I don't think Derek Carr's ever really been a mentally strong quarterback. And I think this might be a little bit too much for him to handle with new coordinators and new coaching and new play callers and all that. I just think this is a week that they don't like this. Plus, it's the Raiders Broncos. Something always crazy happens in Raiders Broncos games, right? So I'm sitting Derek Carr.
That's fair. Who do we want to lock in?
Cousins.
Yeah.
Cousins, locking Cousins.
That's what we do here, right?
Right. And then he'll have, just so everybody knows out there, he's going to have 400 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Either that or get hurt.
Right. Or get hurt. Right.
One or the other.
Yeah, he's gotta, so they gotta stick to the game plan, right? Like, don't believe the other hype. Like when it comes to Thielen and stuff, just keep targeting him. That guy's targets inside the 20. It's always the same. Just keep pounding it into him, Yeah, of course you go to Jefferson too, but when they try to get creative, I feel like Cousins doesn't handle that, right? Stick to the script, as they say. Let's move on to running back, and Fee, we'll start with you, Fee.
I'm calling an audible.
Okay.
I am going with DeAndre Swift as my sit this week. And he's playing Cincinnati. I think that this is more of a Detroit throws the ball all over the field type of game. Especially if, Dunton's right and Burrow is fine and Cincinnati puts up points like they can. So I think that maybe Detroit abandons the run, and I think that you should sit DeAndre Swift.
Fair enough. Dutton.
I am sitting Devonte Booker against the Rams. I don't trust anybody running the ball this weekend against the Rams or the Giants because the Giants are playing a skeleton crew. At this point, I think they're hoping for Joe Morris and Mark Bavaro to come out of the clubhouse
boys
to play because there's nobody. I mean, Sterling Shepard's on the injury list. Like their entire team is hurt.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting Mr. Devonte Booker because they're just going to be gearing up, waiting for him to touch the ball.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, well, I put it this way. If Carson and Alex Collins were fully healthy against the Steelers defense, which has been pretty solid against the rush this year, I would tell you to sit them. Now, Carson missed last week, but according to Pete Carroll, he was held out today, but he's going to be ready to play, and he is expected to be the starter. So that would diminish Alex Collins' role again, who had a decent week last week. So whoever starts, Chris Carson, Alex Collins against the Steelers, I wouldn't start them. But I'm going to put my 2 cents into Devonte Booker because I really do think he's out there on the waiver wire and he is a starting running back. And I think a lot of people are going to jump on him. And I think I'm good with because of that specific reason.
That's why I'm telling people to sit him because I don't want people.
That's why I would lock him in as my sit of the week. Fee?
I don't want people to go out and get him and think, oh, he's going to be Saquon. No.
Yeah, I'm good with that, especially this week against the Rams.
Right.
We've said Saquon's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. If you're the first waiver wire pick, it's not a bad idea to go get him.
Just sit him this week.
Right. Start him this week.
Right. Having him on your team is one thing. Playing him this week is a completely different thing.
Yeah. All right. So Fee, we'll start wide receiver with you.
I am sitting Kadarius Toney this week. I know that last week I was all over him, but this week again against the Rams defense, that is going to be a whole different animal. Again, I don't know if Daniel Jones is playing, if he's going to be back from his concussion. If he's not, it's that much worse, and I wouldn't trust that at all.
Yeah.
And even if he is back, who knows like how effective he's going to be. I would just sit Kadarius Toney this week.
Dutton.
Tyler Lockett against the Steelers. I think DK Metcalf was the favorite target of Geno. So I'm sitting Tyler Lockett.
That's fair. I'm going to tell you, and that breaks my heart on our show, and you know this to say this, but I think you got to sit Allen Robinson this week. The running game's a mess, and Williams now has one of the Qs next to him. He's questionable. Fields is questionable. It sounds like he took the snaps, right? But I mean, that team is banged up. The Packers, like you said, are a team that seems to be getting, lucky sometimes is always good. So if you're rolling, you're rolling, and I just don't think this is the right week to start Allen Robinson. Unfortunately, I have Tyler Lockett, but I do think that I lean towards him as a sit of the week too. And is Toney, what's his deal? Is he playing?
He's got a Q.
I think he is playing. He does have a Q. As far as injury wise, I think he's okay. He's not going to be suspended by the league. I think he's just getting fined.
Okay.
for the punch that he threw.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think he should be on the field.
Okay.
I'm good with Robinson.
I'd sit all three of these guys.
I'm good with Robinson because I was going to pick him. It was
All right,
came down
let's
to
do
him
Robinson.
and Tyler Lockett. So yeah.
Okay. And then that takes us to tight end. Dunton, we'll start with you.
I'm sitting Mr. Schultz of the Cowboys playing the Patriots defense. I think at some point a team is going to figure out we have to guard the tight ends for the Dallas Cowboys. And if anyone's going to do it, it's Bill Belichick. So let's start this week. So sit Schultz.
And on the flip side, I think the Cowboys are going to realize they got to keep going the CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, right? Like
Right.
That's where they're going to win the ball games, not Schultz.
Right.
If you have them, congratulations. You got to
Keep rolling the dice, but I think this week it's rough. The
At
Patriots
some
defense is
point,
good.
Dak is going to start realizing that he's got Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb out there, and
Right.
Schultz's numbers are going to get lower and lower. Feet.
Right.
Yeah, so I told you to sit him last week, and it was spot on. And I think you should sit him again. It's Robert Tonyan. We all know Aaron Rodgers
Doesn't
not
like
love
tight
affair
ends.
with the tight ends. And Wayne said it
Loves
before
them
about
as
someone
people.
but Tonyan should probably be a sit going forward for the rest of the year. Sit him again this week.
I'm going to tell you a guy I think is going to be big on waiver wires this week, and that's Joku on the Browns. He had a ridiculous week last week, but he had as many targets. First of all, he caught all 7 of his targets, right? Which is phenomenal in the first place. But that was as many targets as he had all season. He literally had 7 targets in the first 3 games and then had 7 targets last week. On top of that, I would have told you to sit him anyway because the Cardinals are still the top fantasy defense against tight ends. They've still haven't allowed a touchdown to a tight end, and they still have allowed the least amount of points to the tight end. So I think he's going to be a big waiver wire pickup this week. I think he's going to get thrown in the lineups this week, and I think he's going to let a lot of people down. So that would be my guy to sit. I would sit. I'm hoping good thoughts for Schultz, but I would definitely sit Tonyan. I mean,
I would sit Tonyan. I mean,
seeing that last year was a flash and
it's always 1 year with a tight end, and in the second year he's like, okay, you're a great blocker. I'm going to throw you the ball 3 times for 12 yards. Thank you very much.
All right. So let's do a quick rundown of everything we do. We got Bills and Packers were from me and Dunton, but we're locking in the Rams at minus 10.5 as your lock of the week against the 5th string Giants. Fanduel fees, stacks of the week are Kyler Murray and Rondale Moore and Stafford and just about anyone else on the Rams that you want to throw in there. He likes Gibson as a value play in daily fantasy lineups, Darrell Henderson and Cortland Sutton as well. Now, for starts of the week in your weekly league, we're locking in Taylor Heineke against the Chiefs, Jonathan Taylor against the Texans, Mike Williams against the Ravens, and Noah Fant against the where are they playing? Yeah, Las Vegas. And then for the sits, we got Kirk Cousins because we love to sit Kirk Cousins here at the Fantasy Football Breakdown. Booker, mainly because we think he's going to be a big waiver wire pickup this week, and we don't think it's the right week to start him. Allen Robinson, which breaks our heart as a Fantasy Football Breakdown favorite. And Robert Tonyan, who is now 2 weeks in a row the sit of the week. And I hope for his case he breaks the mold, but I don't think it's happening this week. Gentlemen, before we sign off for another great week, anything to add on the fantasy football front?
Just pay attention to injuries. Lots of injuries. And
don't get fooled by backups and reserves playing in those spots.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. We need to watch this year, and I think the big thing that the casual fantasy footballer is going to fall into the trap more often than not this year. But we'll be here to guide you. Remember, good luck this weekend. Go out there and win. Give us a follow, give us a like, and give us all the credit for your winnings. Have a great night.